This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
I'm Sam Abul Salmon. Not paying attention here.
And after a dramatic pause, I'm Rebecca Linland.
Yeah, it's for effect. It's drama.
That's right.
So welcome back. It's episode 96, and you are both in Chicago for the Chicago Auto Show.
Such as it is, yes.
But we are not recording in a single room. We didn't stuff you guys in a booth. So anyway.
Yes. Rebecca's one floor up.
Yes, and it is windy and snowing a little bit, but not as cold as it's been in last week, I think.
Although it's a lot colder than it was earlier today. It was like in the mid 40s today, and it's supposed to go down to 16 tonight, I think.
It was very cold when we went to some events this evening.
Yeah.
Was it? I mean, there's still acres and acres of carpet. Is it all iced over? Do you have good traction on the carpet there? Or?
Well, the carpet's all inside. The cold is on the outside.
I actually really like this show, though. You know, they claim it's the largest consumer show, I assume by attendance, but it's one of the.
I think probably also by floor space.
I was going to say, I thought it was square footage.
This place is massive.
It's massive, but it's the kind of show that you can. It's not so crazy and it's not so overrun. So it's a lot of domestic journalists, and you get to see people and cars, which usually at other shows you have to decide either you're going to see people or you're going to see cars, because it's almost impossible to do both. So I like this show. It's manageable. And
actually, interestingly enough, we actually did have some news from some of the non-domestic automakers here, though, like Subaru and a little bit from Volkswagen and Land Rover as well.
Yeah, which we can touch on. I'm assuming that's what we want to do at some point during the episode anyway. But
let's come back around to that.
Yeah, and then Ford had their big announcement about adding 500 jobs to their Chicago plant.
All right.
That's right.
So let's talk about what we've been driving first, though.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I would love to start us off this week because I am driving.
Go for it, Dan. What have you been driving?
The 2019 Mitsubishi Mirage G4. And it's easy to make jokes about this car, but I like it. It's like a little underdog. And of course, the main issue with it is that this is $18,500 something worth of underdog. And at that price, it does become difficult to make a case for it. But there's some kind of charm about the Mirage that every time I drive it, I don't hate it. And I realize that it's not really the right car for this market, but it's a brand new car at a low price that you can get. This version is the SE, I think. So it's pretty well equipped as far as small cars go in this segment. And it comes with a warranty. 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. I think 5-year, 60,000-mile overall warranty. There's a 7-year something other, I think it's like corrosion or something warranty. So, if that's important to you, it's not a terrible deal. And I'm sure that because it's Mitsubishi, nobody pays retail.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. I mean, you and I have both driven the Kia Rio. I don't know. Have you driven the new Rio yet, Rebecca?
I have not, no.
Okay. So the Kia Rio was also about 18,000 and change. It's a brand new car. Comes with a warranty, not 10 years, granted, but it comes with a warranty for several years. What makes the Mirage competitive or better than the Rio?
Oh, nothing. It's not near the top of the class. I was thinking about this. So in its class are things like the Yaris, which feels like a Cadillac. The last one I drove compared to the Mirage. There's the and now the Yaris is just the Mazda 2 based Yaris. We don't get the Yaris hatch, do we? Any longer? They killed that. Didn't they? Or am I confused?
They still sell the Yaris hatch.
Okay.
Yeah. I just had one a few months back.
Okay, so I must be confused about what they actually killed. They killed something. But the Yaris hatch feels more cushy. It's about the same price, and it has more power. It actually drives better in a more enthusiastic fashion. Which, when you get down to this end of the market, enthusiasm is sort of it is what you make it. But there's the Yaris, the Mazda 2, the Rio. All of the other choices, I think, are probably better cars. What I like about the Mirage is just how quirky it is. And it feels like, to me, it's like, this is the car that if Tractor Supply sold cars, this is the car they'd sell. It feels like that. I mean, it has a little 1.2.
So you're saying
engine.
it feels agricultural?
Yeah, it does. It's somebody on Twitter commented today, like, "Oh, the engine sounds buzzy." Oh, yes, quite buzzy, and it's quite the flagellum. It vibrates the whole car quite a bit, and it's got 74 horsepower or something like that. But on the whole, I'm impressed by it because it's not for this market. I keep saying that. Like, this is a car that was developed for the Asian market, and this is a city car, and in those respects, it excels. It has that small engine that probably gets you around some taxation things, and is also just relatively economical, but doesn't feel weak. It's teamed with the CVT. The body structure is got quite a bit of high-strength steel in it. It has a impressively low coefficient of drag. You start looking at the car, you go, okay, for what it is, it was designed to be exceptionally inexpensive to manufacture and sell. And so sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep, if I've had too much coffee too late at night, I sit there and I think about these things, like, how would I make a car, like, what is the cheapest possible way to make a car that's not, that doesn't sacrifice anything. It can run on the highway. It can go in town. It's easy to park. You don't give up much except for some prestige, I suppose. And that's really what the Mirage is. The problem is that everything else in the class is that as well, and they're better. But
do you know what your fuel economy is running at? Because it's got 36.43 for fuel economy.
Yeah.
36 city, 43. I mean, that's high.
Yeah, I haven't clocked. I haven't filled up, so I don't know what the mileage is, and it resets the average every time you start it. So I will figure out what exactly my average is. I expect I'm in the mid to high 30s, which isn't great. Like, I would expect better out of a car with less than 100 horsepower from a 3-cylinder engine and a pretty light curb weight. But I'm also asking it to do things like commute 90 miles in a mix of highway and stop and go, and that's going to trash any car's fuel economy to a degree. So,
on the other hand, you talked about the one you're driving is 18.4. Yeah. You can get the Mirage G4 starting at 14.8 with a manual transmission.
Right.
And for that price, it does include a 7-inch touchscreen display that looks like it's got CarPlay and Android Auto support in it. So that's, at under 15 grand. And as you said, you can probably get some screaming deals on these things. I'm sure Mitsubishi dealers would be more than happy to give you a reasonable discount off of that sticker price. You actually do get some decent features in there. At a price point that is, less than pretty much any new car currently available.
Yeah, it's about as cheap as you're ever going to get a brand new car, and it rides and handles okay. They keep tweaking it. It's been around since I think about 2012. It's gone through a mid-cycle refresh, and this is the G4 SE. So this is the sedan. It has a trunk on it, which I like the way this looks better than the hatch. But the hatch, even though it's a little shorter, is probably the more functional choice. But it's a legitimate car. It's just at this end of the market, it's easier for us.
It's got wheels and it's self-propelled, and
Yeah.
that makes it legitimate.
So, I mean, think about it, right? This car it's got it's got that touchscreen audio system. I think you can even upgrade it to something with like 300 watts. It's loud, so you're gonna go deaf. Part of that is the tires, but I think also when you need that lightweight, things like lots of
you mean the car itself is loud, not the audio system.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The car itself, there's a lot of road noise. The weirdest driving dynamic to me is there's something funky going on with the steering, and I think it's probably because it's electric power steering and it shuts off until you dial in a little bit of torque to steering. It must have a sensor that says, oh, he's turning the steering wheel, he wants some electric boost, and then it kicks the pump on or kicks the assist motor on, or however it's set up. I haven't looked at it, but there's this weird notchy feeling just slightly off center, and that feels very strange. And all of a sudden you get assist, so you put in too much angle, and so there's that. The audio, the overall sort of mood in the interior is not cheap, but definitely to a price. It reminds me a lot of like a Super Beetle when they were new. That just it's a basic car and it's not that expensive. And if you want something luxurious, this is not the car for you. But if you need a car, especially if you live in the urban core and don't go super long distances or something like that, this is a car that, because we don't have mass transit everywhere, this is an option.
And actually, I mean, that's actually a very valid point. I mean, we make fun of this car for some, utterly valid reasons, but the reality is, new cars have gotten really expensive.
Yeah,
and most people most people probably can't really afford to buy a new car. I think average transaction prices are, somewhere around $35,000 or more now. A nice compact crossover, which we'll talk about in a minute, is $40,000.
Right.
And that's kind of crazy. For the average person, the average American that needs basic transportation that's going to be reliable, that gets them where they need to go. That they're not looking for something exciting, but they want something that they can count on. That's part of the problem is you can buy used cars, and I generally that's a highly recommended practice, is to buy used cars, because with the depreciation you can save a lot of money buying a used car. But then there's also a significant risk associated with that. If it's out of warranty, you're responsible for anything that breaks on that. You've got to pay for that out of pocket to fix it. If you need to get to work, that's a problem. The car like this, it does come with a warranty, and modern cars, no matter how cheap, are generally pretty reliable.
Yeah.
So this is not generally not something I would buy. But I can certainly understand why there's a significant portion of the population that would and should buy a car like this if they need transportation.
Yeah,
look, it's first of all, it's better than the bus, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, especially in a lot of places in the U.S. that is absolutely true.
Right. If there is no bus, you have no choice.
Yeah,
right. And so for this price point, it's got Android Auto, it's got Apple CarPlay. Is it
got cruise control?
It does. I mean, that's the thing. And as you say, is this something that, an enthusiast is going to buy? No, but for basic good transportation, and that warranty is 10 years, 100,000 miles. I mean, that's really significant. You can, there are deals on it. You can get a lease for like $189 a month. I mean, that's what you spend at Starbucks for a week, practically.
To be fair, the most amazing leases I ever saw were on like Chrysler 200s before they brought up the last one.
Right.
I saw them for like $89 a month for like $1,500 down.
Hey,
for
for a while, they were doing $49 a month leases on the 500E in California.
Crazy.
Jeez. But I mean,
Crazy.
I mean, look, it has keyless entry. It has push button start, which is on the left of the dash, like a Porsche 911.
Love it.
Right?
Love it.
Has air conditioning, power windows. You know, it has Bluetooth, and you know, the audio system didn't sound that good, and the car is a little loud. Dynamically, it's actually not terrible dynamically because it's light. So light cars you can sort of fling around. It has, I guess, a bit of body roll.
It's a slow car you can drive fast.
Yeah, and it keeps up with traffic. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have a problem there. It's definitely, sometimes you got to put your spurs into it, but yeah, that's to be expected. You know, there's not anything wrong with it, and I feel like it gets a bad rap, especially from those of us who have the cushy position to drive cars we'd never be able to afford on a regular basis.
You know what? I think this is a good example, though, of where we have to put ourselves in the consumer's shoes. We have to look at the consumer that this vehicle suits. And that may not be any of us, but it's somebody, you know, it's a new graduate. You know, it's somebody that maybe they're in retirement and they want to spend their money on something else. But it's still a new car. It still has safety features that a 7 or 8 year old used car isn't going to have.
Right.
You know, a backup camera, you know, things like this. And Android Auto and you know, Apple CarPlay, there is some argument to be made that yes, they can be distracting on the one hand. On the other hand, they can provide a safety element to it. So it's, you know, there is a market for these types of vehicles.
Yeah, I would say.
And having Android Auto and CarPlay means that you also have access to navigation in the car.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, if you need guidance as to, you know, where to go, it's there for you. You know, so that there's definitely a lot to recommend, you know, as basic transportation here.
Yeah, I mean, we can have fun, and I can say like, yeah, I didn't hate it, and you know, it's okay. Brianna Wu actually said on Twitter, she's just like, I just want Mitsubishi to be okay. I was like, oh, this is definitely okay.
Right.
You know, and that's true. It's not the best car in its class, but in this class, it's actually very competitive. There's you can get a lot of car for your money, and you have to shop, I think, all of the suspects that we mentioned, and maybe some that we forgot, because you're going to find the one that suits you the best and fits your needs. And, you know, depending on where you are, where you're going, you know, service and support are important to you too. So if the Mitsubishi dealer is near you, that's something to think about. If the Mitsubishi dealer is the only one that can finance you, that's also something to think about. Or if they'll give you a better deal. You know, like those are a lot of concerns that auto journalists, having, you know, a week with a car, not having to pay for it, not having to deal with those practical concerns we don't think about. But, you know, it's an option in that end of the class, and it's not a choice that anybody should be ashamed of. It's definitely, like you said, Sam, it's not what I would pick, but I was, you know, I was charmed a bit by it because it has that underdog spirit, you know, and I think it's the only one with a triple, and I like that little growl. You know, it's
sort of like the Patriots last Sunday. You know, they were underdogs.
Yeah,
it was a mirage. They were underdogs.
The Patriots as underdogs, really? Come on.
Hey,
did you miss my line? I said it was a mirage, but they were underdogs.
Okay.
So then the Mirage showed up the same day they had their big stupid parade in Boston. So
the big fabulous parade, you mean?
It so obliterated my commute. I'm still waiting to figure out how much it cost, because you know, taxpayers are footing the bill for the gridlock and the extra police and then the pollution from all the cars idling. I looked around at all the stuff next to me in the gridlock, and it was just a bunch of chumps all in their Patriots gear headed into town. I'm just trying to get to work. I was so aggravated. We need better mass transit. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
So moving on.
And the Mirage also has Hill Start Assist, which is also a very useful feature.
It's hard not to be impressed with the amount of value you're getting in cars these days. And the Mirage is easy to make fun of, but I think it's actually a little harder to put yourself outside of yourself, and really appreciate it for what it is and where it fits in the market. I mean, people make the same kind of jokes about the Yaris, but the Yaris is a solid choice. I mean, I think
the current generation Yaris is actually pretty decent.
Mm-hmm. I like the small, cheap cars.
I think the Mirage, where it really falls short is when you do start comparing it to things like the Kia Rio, the Hyundai Accent, and also the residual value that those vehicles are going to probably maintain.
Oh yeah,
better, than the Mirage. So I think that's where you start to run into some real comparisons. But again, it's better than the bus.
Yeah, very true.
All right. Well, let's move on to what you two are driving. You're sort of driving the same thing. You both got to spend some time with the Mazda CX-5. So who wants to go first?
Sam, go ahead.
Okay. So, I've always been a fan of Mazda. I like the brand. I like what they do with cars and their utilities. And, I've liked the CX-5 when I've driven it in the past, particularly this current generation. Mazda, especially, in the segments it competes in, the price points it has competed in, it has generally had some of the nicest interiors you will find, in the mainstream segments. They have done a really fantastic job of executing over the last 7-8 years. That said, this particular CX-5, this 2019 CX-5 that I just had, and Rebecca had the same one. I think the Signature with the new 2.5 liter turbo.
Yes.
As good as it is, I'm having a really hard time dealing with a $40,000 price tag.
What?
Yes.
No.
$39,330 delivered.
Oh, mine is $39,905 delivered.
Oh, you had a better one.
Yes.
So obviously, yours had some option I was missing. I don't know, but
what was yours?
I had a Signature with cargo mat, illuminated door sill trim plates.
Yep.
For $400. I can live without those. The snowflake white pearl paint.
It looks good with that. Does it have tan interior?
Yeah. No, mine had a black interior. Rear bumper guard, retractable cargo cover, and a roof rack with side rails.
Oh, okay. So I didn't have the fancy paint, but I had a front and rear bumper trim package for, I think it's $650.
Okay. That's probably the difference.
Yeah. So it bases, so the Signature all-wheel drive based at $36,890 for the MSRP, and then these other crazy little options that they added, and then delivery was $985. So it tops out at $39,905.
Okay, but Mazda doesn't have a premium brand. So unlike say Honda, where there's Acura, there is no, they never launched a Mati. So there's room in Mazda's lineup when you've got the Signature. And this is the top model of the CX-5. You can certainly get a cheaper one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can get a front wheel drive CX-5 2-liter, starting at $25,000, which is actually pretty reasonable. And even, the mid-level trims, you get something like the Grand Touring starts at 31.4. The Touring's 28. So, one of those, even a Touring, which is the second trim level up, that has the 2.5 liter engine. That's, something like that, up to, the low $30,000 range, I think is fine. I highly recommend those. And I have recommended them to people in the past when people have come to me saying, I want to get a small crossover. The CX-5 is usually, one of the vehicles at the top of the list that I recommend because I really like the way it drives. I like the way it looks. I've always liked the way that they execute the interior. Very comfortable, good seats. Lots of features in there. It's just this, as these latest ones, with the turbo, the Grand Touring Reserve, and the Signature. It seems like it's a step too far because I don't think that there's I don't think you're getting enough extra with those trim levels versus even the Grand Touring with the 2.5, with the normally aspirated 2.5 to justify the price point. I don't know. What do you think, Rebecca?
I agree. I mean, when I usually get a car, I'll drive it around for the day and, kind of make notes and sort of look at it, experience it. And then I look at the price because I don't want to have, and I kind of think, okay, how much would I expect to pay for this vehicle? And I almost fell over when I saw the CX-5 because I think, my personal vehicle that primarily sits in the driveway is a 2015 Buick Encore that I think had a price of about 31. And it doesn't have a few features. It doesn't have keyless entry. It doesn't have an electronic lift gate. There's a couple things it doesn't have, but it's also $31,000 as opposed to almost $40,000. And then we start to get into what else could I buy for that? And that's what I start to think about then as well.
You could probably get a Mirage for that price difference.
You could too.
Get an Encore and a Mirage.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I had something. I had a 2019 Lexus UX200, which is their smallest crossover. I had that a couple of weeks ago, and it's a Lexus, and it starts at $37,200, and the one that I had topped out at $41,560. So, it was, what is that, $1,600 more for a really, really well-equipped Lexus. And
but what features did the Lexus have that the Mazda didn't have?
Probably had a really obnoxious infotainment system because that's Lexus.
And the Mazda does have support for CarPlay and Android Auto now, so
it does. And Lexus only has Apple CarPlay. It does have Amazon Alexa as well. But the driving experience was really nice with the Lexus. And I still get back to the fact that you have to look at residual value as well. And the Lexus is going to maintain its value more than the Mazda is. And, it was a really, it was a fun little car to drive around in, and the Mazda is too. But, and to your point, Dan, it is true that Mazda doesn't have a luxury brand. But I just think that, I had a hard time, and I've actually reached out to friends of mine at Mazda. I just saw them here in Chicago, and I said, I need some explanation.
Yeah.
What is your competitive set? When you priced this vehicle, what were you comparing it to? And unfortunately, I haven't heard back yet, but I will be really curious to see what they benchmarked for the CX-5.
Well, I wonder too whether it's meant to not actually sell that many, but shift perception of Mazda, because Mazda's in this place where they're a very small automaker comparatively. And yet they at least occupy some mind share right now, and they need to do something to differentiate themselves, almost like what BMW has done on a different level, right? They need to come up with that unique Mazda thing, and they're working on it, and I think they're doing a pretty good job. But they have to continue to move beyond, Mazdas are sort of cheap, fun cars, because even now they don't really have that top of mind of the buyers, right? Buyers are going to go for Chevys or, Volkswagens or whatever. They don't necessarily go for Mazdas all the time.
Right. And they've certainly, tried to shift the brand up market over the last several years. They've tried to create the perception of Mazda as more of a premium brand, but one that is also, while still retaining their fun to drive attitude.
Yeah. And I think the things that you get on this sort of top trim too, you get the Napa leather, and maybe they're a little too subtle about it, because if you look around and you start to compare the spec sheet, you see the things that are real luxury car features that you don't get on the lower trims that you can get here. And they make a difference. But I think you're right. Like, it's not a not a palpable enough difference, or it's not obvious enough to really make you feel like it's worth that money. It's certainly nice, but nobody's gonna, honestly, for me, like I'd be like, look, nice leather red is fine. I don't even need real hides. Like I don't care.
It's a little bit like putting, really expensive appliances in a mid-level house.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, okay, that's great, but you're not going to get your money back from it.
This is CX-5 with the wall oven.
Right. You put these crazy Wolf range, that's $10,000 or $12,000 in $100,000 house. You're not going to get that back. And so I do appreciate that they want to move up market, and there's definitely opportunities there, and and perceptions of people feel like Mazda has this. It's a unique vehicle. You don't see them everywhere. Not everyone has. They're not ubiquitous. And they do have a certain emotional appeal, and they certainly are very fun, to drive. But at the end of the day, this buyer, that crossover, 5-passenger crossover. First of all, it's an unbelievably competitive segment right now, especially. But they tend to be quite practical. They want a nice looking vehicle, but spending $40,000, it's a lot of money on this particular size of vehicle.
So do you think that it's in the right place though, where you've got some buyers are coming up and some buyers are coming down, and this is sort of at the crossroads where you've got that downsizing buyer who has money, and then you've got that up and coming buyer who's stretching a little but wants something nice and different and quirky. And do you think it's ideally positioned, or do you think it's a little bit off?
I think that if they took it down a couple $1,000s, I could see it being more competitive. I just think when consumers look and see that 38, 39 range, I struggle with that for this size. We will. I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Blazer, the Chevy Blazer, and that has a lot of personality, and I think it's even actually a little bit bigger, and that tops out at about, again, like 40, 41, and 42 in that range. So I think there's so much competition. We talked about the Honda Passport, so there's so much competition in this particular space that I think you really have to justify. You've got to be able to justify why you're looking at this kind of money.
And go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say, you compared the Lexus UX to this, and I think the UX is really, a size class down. It's more like the CX-3 size.
Right.
The NX is more the direct competitor.
Yes, you're right.
Here.
Yep. Fair enough. Yeah.
And the NX does start at about $38,000 or $36,000. And so I think comparably equipped to something like this, like a CX-5 Signature, it's closer to about the $44,000-$45,000 range. But I agree with you. I think if this kind of topped out maybe a couple of grand cheaper, in that 37.5, 38 range, I think it would feel more palatable. It's clear, it's clearly still fairly pricey, but I think just the perception of it, I think maybe Mazda is maybe trying to move a little bit too aggressively to create that premium feel, or that premium perception of the brand, with its pricing, and maybe it's just not quite ready to be there yet with these vehicles. I don't know that there's enough that extra that you're getting, in stepping up to one of those top two trim levels on this thing to justify the cost premium.
Well, but they're there. So before we move on, though, we should talk about that 2.5 liter turbo engine.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like
for sure.
it. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's got lots of power. 250 horsepower, 310 foot-pounds of torque. It goes. Especially when you put it in sport mode. It's got plenty of get up and go. That's not an issue at all.
Well, I mean that's almost there's got to be double the torque of the CX-5 when it originally came out. I remember there were two engines, and the 2-liter I think was the one you could get with the manual. And boy, did that thing was weak, but it was fun to drive.
Yeah, the 2-liter is the naturally aspirated 2.5, which I think is the base engine in here now. I don't think you can even get the 2-liter in the CX-5 anymore. So the 2.5 naturally aspirated is 187 horsepower and 186 foot-pounds of torque. So yeah, I mean it's about 80% more torque with the turbo than you get with the naturally aspirated engine, and you can definitely feel the difference. It's definitely got plenty to go, and one of the things they've added in here for the 19s is their G vectoring system, which is it's kind of an automatic trail braking system. As you're cornering, it can back off the engine torque a little bit, as you're going through corners. So it detects your cornering, backs off the engine torque just enough that you get a little bit of weight transfer onto the front wheels, and that helps you get a little more grip on the front wheels, and it'll turn in a little bit better. A skilled driver, can do the same thing by just modulating the accelerator a little bit as you go through the corner. But this does it for you, and it does it really seamlessly. It helps it turn in really nicely and really smoothly.
It's like kind of like the CX-5 we always said that we wanted, right? It's like, this is great, but it needs to be quieter and more powerful. And it sounds like the last, it might have been even a CX-9, but I was impressed by the last couple Mazdas I was in. They finally figured out how to make them quiet. And they've also finally figured out how to make them powerful. And so they're very competitive. And the CX-5 is the best-selling Mazda, I think, of all the vehicles they make, at least in the U.S., that it sells better than anything else. So if they're going to try an expensive super luxe version, I guess this is the place to do it.
And it's certainly very, very well equipped at that price. I mean, there's heated and cooled seats, heated and cooled in the front. There's heated in the back. There's a heated steering wheel. It's got a lot of creature comforts. But I still did not feel like I was driving a nearly $40,000 vehicle. And it looks great. It's got nice proportions. It's very kind of modern and clean looking. But I don't know. I had a hard time getting over that price point. I also didn't get very good fuel economy around town.
Oh yeah, I bet.
I mean, it says it's rated at 22. But, and granted, I didn't drive it as much as I normally would for a variety of reasons, but I clocked 40 miles and mostly around town. I was on the highway for about, I would say 15 miles of that, and I got 16.6.
Oh, that's worse than I thought. I was figuring you'd get like 18 and a half or so.
I averaged about 22 over the week, and that included some driving when it got particularly frigid last week, but it also included a bunch of highway driving on Monday of this week when it was quite a bit warmer. I mean it was in the upper 20s, low 30s on Monday. So cold weather is always going to deteriorate your fuel economy anyway, but yeah, I only managed about 22 even with a bunch of highway driving. So yeah, it was kind of disappointing on the fuel economy side as well.
Yeah, but I think it's hard to expect that a car. What does it weigh? About 3,500 pounds or so, something like that.
I think it's probably closer to 37.
Okay, so a 3,700 pound car with 250 horsepower. That's about what a turbocharged 3,700 pound car with that kind of power gets. Well, yeah, it's almost.
I would say if you're driving it in a sporty manner, I would say that's a perfectly legitimate statement. But in my case, I was using it. I drove to from my home to Dearborn for one meeting, and then to Farmington Hills, Michigan for a couple other meetings. And I was mostly just, cruising on the highway. I just set the cruise control at 70 approximately, and let it go. And so I wasn't doing anything particularly aggressive with it, and still did not get particularly impressive fuel economy.
Yeah, I mean, every turbocharged car I've owned that has been about that size and weight with that kind of power has returned about that kind of mileage.
Well, but it's rated. I mean, the city's 22, highway 27, combined 24, and I typically get pretty close to what the rating is. It's usually it's within a mile or two, but I was a little surprised that it wasn't a little bit better than that. And maybe I was driving more aggressively. I was certainly on a lot of curves and up and downs. The other thing that surprised me was that it actually has a pretty poor smog rating of 3. And it's got a fuel economy and greenhouse gas rating of 5. So, it's not really a super clean. I don't know. I wanted to really like this vehicle. As we said at the beginning, Mazda is a great brand, and I think they do really good products. But there's a couple things that I was a little surprised about on this one.
I'm surprised that the fuel economy is, so off as well, because it doesn't this actually run like partial Miller cycle at certain like throttle openings, certain conditions.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So again, it's a little baffling that it doesn't get better fuel economy.
Yeah, I took a picture to make sure that I was really looking at it correctly. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'll get an opportunity to have it again and drive it a little bit more.
Well, maybe you'll get answers out of Mazda once they recover from the party.
That would be helpful as well, for sure.
All right, so do we want to talk about the Blazer?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, you're the only one who's driven it, Rebecca, so tell us all about it.
So I really enjoyed this vehicle. I think that General Motors did a nice job. I always think that GM doesn't really suffer from engineering issues. I think they do a good job. It drives in this very wide, steady, confident stance, and so I felt like it was going to be able to kind of tackle. We weren't on particularly challenging roads in San Diego, and we actually did not get the opportunity to take it off road, which I was kind of disappointed about. I think the purists are going to be very offended that it's not a truck-based SUV. It is car-based, but that's what the market requires these days. And so, and that was a decision that they made, that if they were going to come out with this 5-passenger vehicle that, is really, it's similar to the Passport. It's a more personal kind of vehicle, that it was going to be what the market demands. And that's the crossover right now. It does have 2 rows. It's 5-passenger. They consider it a mid-size crossover. So it will compete with, I think, like the Escape that comes out. It's bigger. It's bigger than the Equinox, but I felt like it was much sportier than the Equinox. Like I wouldn't really consider buying the Equinox, but I would consider buying the Blazer. It just had a lot more personality to it.
Certainly does from a design perspective.
Yeah,
right.
Honestly, I like the design of it. I know people are also split on that, but
I liked the design of it too, especially the RS version, which I call real sexy. It just had a nice, it has a nice aggressive stance to it. The interior is basically lifted directly from the Chevy Camaro, which I think is a good thing. And then the technology, they've done a lot of work on the technology, making it more intuitive, making it easy to understand, to interact with, very easy to pair your phone, things like that. The towing capacity is 4,500 pounds, which is really good. And it also has Chevy's trailering package. So that's available on V6 all-wheel drive versions of it. They've got 2 engines. They're both mated to the 9-speed transmission. There's a 2.5-liter inline 4-cylinder and the much beefier 3.6-liter V6, which is really the dominant engine and what they expect most people to choose from. So The base MSRP is $29,995, which I love when they do that. They want to get something under 30. That RS that I mentioned, it's a much more urban kind of look to it. That's actually $41,795. But then the one that has everything is the Premier, and that's $43,895. I feel like, this particular buyer, again, similar to that Passport, is somebody that's single, empty nester, maybe has one kid, probably not, a little bit more affluent, a little bit more, adventurous, has or wants to have the perception of an active lifestyle. But I think it's got good cargo, good capability. It was certainly really, I did enjoy driving it. But again, we didn't go off road with it at all.
How's the visibility out of it?
The visibility was really good. I can't say that I struggle particularly with visibility, but it was fine. I mean, the rear, they did this clever, like, third little round porthole almost at the D pillar. And so that helps with, obviously they have blind spot monitoring and detection and stuff. So, but just for, pure visibility, they do, the backup camera is excellent. And then they did do these little portholes at the ends of the D pillars so that you can see out of that as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you didn't get a chance to drive this off road, and I don't think that Chevy is really pushing this as much as the adventure vehicle as Honda is with Passport, but more of the personal on road crossover. Right. And interestingly, there was a report out last week, I think, that they have also recently renewed their trademark on the Trailblazer brand.
Oh, that is interesting.
So perhaps they're planning, whether it's a derivative of this or maybe something based off the Colorado pickup, a mid-size SUV, off-road oriented SUV that they'll use the Trailblazer brand on and target that one more directly at something like the Wrangler and the upcoming Bronco. Yeah. As an alternative, that fills yet another niche in the GM SUV lineup.
Well, I don't think they actually need to make this an off-road capable vehicle. Like, that's not what people are buying them for. It's not even what people buy Wranglers for. So they need to fill it with the features that people are going to buy. And it sounds like what they really want is the crossover equivalent of a Monte Carlo. That sort of like personal luxury car from the 70s.
Yeah.
And okay. So it's like
yeah. I mean, I think, this kind of, maybe falls, kind of halfway in between, Camaro and Monte Carlo, a little, bigger and roomier, obviously, than a Camaro, but kind of with that, a little more, from a design perspective, at least, a little more of that Camaro attitude.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and when I say Monte Carlo, too, like, don't get me wrong, I do not mean the embarrassing W-body Montes. I mean, like
the proper 1970s, early 80s Montes.
Right, a Colonnade Monte, Anyway.
Right.
Or maybe the SS.
Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, I do think that the only reason I bring up the off-road is because it was so emphasized with Honda, with the Passport. I mean, most of our time was spent off-road. Right. So it's just kind of funny how each brand chose to launch these very similar vehicles. But I do think that I think the Blazer is certainly very capable. I had a nice sense of confidence with it. My driving partner, who shall remain nameless, is known as one of the more cynical people in the industry, and even he liked it, like, very reluctantly.
There are no cynical people in this industry. Come on.
Right. Very reluctantly, but so I did write a little review on I'll do a quick self-promotion. I have a new website, RebeccaDrives.com. And so I did my quick little 200 words or less review on there about the Blazer, if people want to read it. But
we'll include the links in the show notes.
Yes, thank you. But I think it's, what I like about this size vehicle, what I like about the looks of this vehicle is that to me, it just gives that sporty, fun, single feeling that, so much of our world is family oriented, which is fine if you have a family. But somebody like me who doesn't, I don't want to be in a mommy mobile. I just don't.
Yeah, I think it's important for some of those folks who have that asset in their lives to have a vehicle that doesn't outwardly sort of give that aura off either.
Right.
I think it's. It's kind of like they had this stuff kicking around. They sort of rejiggered a bunch of stuff they had already, and I think they made a pretty good vehicle. The people that are complaining about it, they're going to complain about anything. It wouldn't matter. I mean, they could have brought out a brand new Blazer like the old style Blazer, and they still would have complained. So,
yeah.
Did you get a chance to drive the 4-cylinder version or just the V6?
You know what? I was looking back on my notes, and I only got to drive the V6, and then I wasn't sure if maybe they didn't have them there, but I thought they had, and so I think they may have only had a couple there. Obviously, they're intending that most of the people will get the 3.6 liter V6. Yeah,
and given that this thing has a 4,200 pound curb weight, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
It's not exactly svelte.
No.
So.
It's a substantial vehicle. I mean, it's wide. It's wide and has nice proportions, but definitely a masculine stance to it.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
All right. Well, I'll hopefully at some point get an opportunity to drive it. I know, Sam, you will definitely get an opportunity to drive it. So
yeah, it's already in the Detroit fleet.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, somebody has one already. I saw them post it.
All right. Well, I will ask about that one.
Yeah.
And someday you may get GM cars in your neck of the woods again, Dan. But maybe not. Yeah, maybe not.
You know what? If they don't want to sell any, they don't have to send them here for us to talk about them. That's fine.
Yep.
All right. Let's do some other topics while we're winding down. So, do we want to chat about what was in Chicago briefly, or there's a couple other things that we could talk about? But what's sort of the top of your mind to cover?
I really liked the Nissan Pathfinder that we saw, the Rock Creek edition. It's kind of cosmetic. It has some unique. I think it's a roof rack, some accoutrements. It's about $1,000. Version add-on, but it kind of gives the Pathfinder some fun personality.
Is that supposed to be like a more rugged, like off-roady kind of thing?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, it doesn't. I don't
certainly
know.
Appearing that way.
Yeah. It definitely gives that more rugged appearance.
Although I will say that the Pathfinder is actually surprisingly capable off-road. Even without this appearance package. Nissan did an event in Carmel, not last summer, but the year before. And, it was focused on trucks and utilities, and they had the Pathfinder, the Armada, and the Titan there. And they had an off-road course that we drove the Pathfinder on back then. And it did shockingly well for what is a fairly large 3-row crossover. I was really impressed with it. I did not expect it to handle, that kind of terrain with the kind of capability that it did. So, now, it kind of looks more the part. I doubt it's any more capable than it was, but that's not necessarily a problem because I think, it's got some serious chops.
And I love great rims. The rim, there's they're 18-inch dark finish aluminum alloy wheels, and they just look fantastic. I thought it really added a lot to the vehicle.
And being 18s, that means it actually has some side walls, so that if you are gonna take it off road, you are less likely to destroy, one or more tires along the way.
Yeah.
It is one of the better looking Pathfinders I've seen of this sort of generation, and every one of them, I'm surprised that it actually did so well off road when you tried it, because every single Pathfinder I've ever driven has driven so miserably. They're just big and family truckstery, and just you're surrounded by a lot of loose. Nothing's loose. It's relaxed fit, I guess, is the design. It's just big thing, and it wallows.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a Wrangler, but for what it is, I mean, it's able to go, through, fording some reasonably deep water, going over some, it's got some decent ground clearance, so it can go over some, go down some 2-track trails and things like that. So, you can take it to places like you might not expect, a big family wagon to go.
Huh.
And in this dark green, I think that it's a fantastic shade to put on this thing.
No, I love that dark green.
So what else did we see at Chicago? We saw, let's see, the Jetta GLI. There was
which is the new Jetta, which we've both driven and really liked, and they put the GTI powertrain in it, so 228 horsepower, 258 foot-pounds of torque, and it's basically a 4-door sedan GTI, which is what the GLI's kind of always been, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, nobody's gonna complain about that, right?
I'm not.
For me, the other big thing that I saw was the Ram multi-gate split tailgate on the Ram 1500 pickup truck.
Oh yeah, and now everybody is fully into the act with the trick tailgates.
They are, but so I had the Ram 1500 a few weeks ago. I think around Thanksgiving I had it. And first of all, I loved the vehicle.
Oh, it's such a great truck. Yeah.
It's so great. It's won so many awards. However, at 5 feet tall, I could not get in and out of the pickup truck bed. If I put the bed down, if I put the tailgate down, it covered the only footwell that I had, which is the license plate, to get into the vehicle. So then I would have to I would have to put my bum on the tailgate and swing my legs over to get in. And if it's dirty, it's gross. I don't want to do that. If it's wet, I'm getting wet. So, no access to the pickup truck bed was really annoying. And while I realize that I'm the size of a 13-year-old, there's still, a lot of people with arthritis, with any kind of, physical limitations, an aging population, most
or
women,
even if you're even if you're not, if there's something,
heavy,
relatively heavy or bulky that you need to reach into the bed to get. I mean, you've got to reach over that tailgate to get it. Especially if it's something that might have slid forward in the bed, that can be quite a reach to get in there. And like you said, because the only step back there was, on the bumper itself. Once you put that tailgate down, you lose that. And, and this new multi-action tailgate or multi-function tailgate really addresses that. So you can still open it like a standard truck bed, or it also splits in the middle, actually splits 60-40 and swings out to the side. So it's in a way it's similar to what you can do with the Honda Ridgeline, except the Ridgeline is just a single piece tailgate, and it'll swing out to the left. So it's only hinged on one side. This one is hinged on both sides, which is an advantage because it gives you flexibility. If you need to carry something long, you can leave either side of that open and hang it out the back and still have the other side closed. But also, because the two halves are shorter, it doesn't swing out as far. So if you don't need as much room, as much clearance behind the truck to actually swing that thing open. And then when you do swing it open, you have access to the tailgate bumper. And they also made available a new hideaway step that extends down even further from the bumper. So you can step on that and then step up to the bumper and then into the bed.
Yeah, and that was super easy to use as well. It, as you say, it tucks underneath by the muffler, and then you just pull it out just with your foot. You can just bring it out, and then you actually just kick it back in and it pops back in again. And it provides you with a very easy ingress and egress to the bed, which is really well lined, really well made. So that door, I was actually on, I did 2 hits for Fox Business News and Fox News Channel on this, and
we won't hold that against you.
So we were looking at the hinges on this, and the hinges on that hold each of the door pieces to the bed itself, to the truck itself rather. They're about 10 inches of forged steel, and it's all one piece. I mean, these things are significant because the tailgate itself, it has, I believe it's a 2,000 pound weight, and then the step has, I think it's 600 pounds. So it's very capable. It's really well done. It was not cheap to do this. It is quite different. And by the way, it's available on any trim level as an option. I think it's $995 that it's going to be, that is the option. And then the optional center step adds another $295 to it. But I will say that the GMC Pro Liftgate has more utility. It's certainly more complicated and it's only available on upper trims, but it's competitive to that. This is just a simpler version of it. Solves a lot of problems, but I'm still a little partial to the GMC version.
Well, one thing that Ram mentioned is that the GMC version, if you open like the middle part of that tailgate and drop it down, if you have a trailer connected, that won't work. Whereas the Ram tailgate, you can swing those open with a tailgate or with a trailer connected, and you don't have to disconnect the trailer, but you can still get access to the bed. Right.
So there's an improvement in if you're trailering with the functionality of it. The GMC version of this does, it arguably does more things. It gives you a workspace. It does several different iterations. So I think it's both of them are worth looking at. I've spent some time in both trucks. There's certainly, I like the way that each of them drives. They both drive smaller than they look, and which is always nice because it's a big truck, but you don't feel like you're slogging it around, especially in a suburban environment where I usually am driving. But I did like that multi-pro tailgate from GMC a lot.
Yeah. Speaking of big trucks, Chevrolet also had their new Silverado HD here, yes. Which is enormous.
So do you like it? Do you think it's, because they're styling wise, they've moved on a bit from where they had been a lot more conservative. What do you think of just how it looks?
It's really big. How
big is it?
It's 10 inches longer than the previous version. Wow. The longest version. They have, one of the interesting things that's happened over the last 15 years or so is there's been a real, the three Detroit automakers have really kind of split their heavy duty trucks apart from their light duty trucks. It used to be, if you go back to, even the late 1990s, and you look at, the heavy duty versions of the full size pickups versus the light duties, purely from a visual perspective, you would have a hard time noticing any, visual difference. You'd have a hard time picking them apart without looking at the badges. And over the last decade, they've really split them and, really moved the heavy duty trucks up the line more. And something that was interesting, going back to, I think it was 2009, when Ford launched, it was like 2 generations ago of the F-150. I was at, a drive event at their Romeo Proving Grounds in Michigan for that truck. And, they talked at that point, this was right after the financial meltdown, and Gas prices were still, in the $3.50, $4 a gallon range or more. And one of the things that they talked about at that time is that as the light duty trucks had moved up in capability at that point, they were, kind of encroaching on where the 2500s were, the bottom of the heavy duty truck lines. And a lot of buyers were actually stepping down to the light duty trucks because they had enough capability to meet their needs. And so what they've done in the years since then is they've continued to move the heavy duties further up, giving them more towing capability, and the GM trucks now, all of the I think the 3500s, both the gas and the diesel now have, over 30,000 pound towing capabilities, which is, is insane. The diesel, the 3500 diesel dual rear axle, dual rear wheel, has a 35,500 pound towing capability now. But they have done some, they've done a lot of refinement on these trucks. One of the interesting things that Monty Doran, who's the comms manager for Chevy trucks, he gave me a walk around on the thing, showed me some of the details. In the past, if you had a block heater especially for the diesel engines, for when it's cold, you'd have this extension cord dangling out usually from underneath the hood, between the hood and the grill, where you'd plug it in. And they've actually integrated all that on this one. So on the lower front air dam on the side, on the driver's side, there's a little door there. You open that up, and that's where the plug is, and you just plug right into that, almost like on an EV. So you don't have this thing, you don't have this cord dangling out for the block heater. They've got the side steps on the side of the bed. They're standard, ahead of the rear wheels, and like the rear step on the Ram, that has 600 pound, I think, capability. I think it was like 580 pounds on the side steps on the HD. So you can step up there and reach into the bed to get stuff. What else? Another interesting detail. A lot of the HD trucks are used for snow plows. But obviously you don't leave the plow on there year round. In the summertime, the people that operate plows, they usually take the plows off and they use those trucks for other things. And in the past, they would have to, cut up the bumper or cut up, part of the front fascia to get to mount the plow on there. On these new ones now, you can they've designed it so you can just take that, take a couple bolts out and unbolt that front piece there, mount your plow, and then when you take the plow off, you can just stick that piece back on there, and it looks normal. So they spent a lot of detailed time on things that you wouldn't normally think of, but that actually make a difference to the people that are using these trucks. These are also the first heavy duty trucks that have automatic 4-wheel drive. So that it'll automatically shift between 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive based on road slip. That's never been done on the heavy duty trucks before. So lots of interesting details on this stuff.
Well, that's where innovation is happening, is the big trucks.
Yeah,
it is, and the price points are going up as well. Ram also introduced a luxury version of some of their commercial vehicles, really reflecting that the trend towards luxury that's really overtaken the truck market, the true truck market.
And was it before the show or during, where Ford introduced their new 2020 Super Duty with the enormous pushrod V8?
It was actually just before the show. Yeah, they announced a new 7.3, two new engines actually for their 2020 Super Duties, 7.3 liter gas engine, and a redesigned version of the 6.7 liter diesel as well.
Yeah, and I tried to line up something with Ford, so we'll hopefully have something soon where we're actually talking with somebody about that truck. Because I was really interested, like you're going back to the pushrod engine, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think there's solid reasons. But just to sort of hear how they worked through that decision process, and to have them let us down easy, that you're probably never going to see one of those engines in a Mustang, and you shouldn't expect to.
Yeah,
we go a little nuts for big displacement, but that's not what it's for. So yeah, I mean, there's some stuff happening at Chicago, which they make a good case for themselves for being I guess one of the premier shows around the season, around the circuit.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the big, one of the main bits of news that has come out of Chicago, when there is news here, and there usually isn't a whole lot of new product introductions here in Chicago, but this does tend to be the place where they make a lot of news around the big trucks, especially the heavy duty trucks and the commercial trucks.
Yes, but Land Rover unveiled the new Evoque here.
Yeah.
Which
true.
Is, they're not even at the Detroit Auto Show. So it's, there's definitely a difference here. But yeah, so Land Rover showed the new Evoque, base price of just over $42,000. It's got a 2.0 liter engine, 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, but it looks great. I mean, it's very appealing. It actually reminds me a lot of the Volvo XC40, which is, a friend of mine dropped hers off. It was Tiffany blue with a white top, and it was just adorable, the Volvo. But the Evoque has that same very, very appealing styling. It's great proportions. There's just something. This to me, I think, is a more elegant version of, and certainly more luxurious than something like the Blazer that we talked about before, but still a very personal vehicle, a very personal ride, perfect for singles, for empty nester kind of, smaller families, and just a great. I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful vehicle.
Well, yeah, well, and bringing it back around to what we were talking about the CX-5 earlier. I mean, this is in that same class, that compact, that C segment crossover class as the CX-5, but this as a Land Rover, the Land Rover is the other brand that, like Jeep, everything they sell has real serious off-road capability,
right?
And so the Evoque lives up to that. It can go pretty much anywhere, and this is a vehicle that I think as a premium small utility, I think really lives up to that, both in its exterior design and its interior execution. And they announced the pricing for the U.S. version of the Evoque, which starts at, I think it was $42,650. Was that
yes,
it?
Yeah, $42,650. Yeah.
And when it goes on sale this spring, so that's a little more than the CX-5. But I mean, if you're in that $40,000 range anyway, this may be a more appealing option to you than a Mazda.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to give you more status. It's probably not going to be nearly as well equipped until I'm looking at their brochure now. Getting an understanding of their trim levels and such. But
yeah, I mean, you can probably get this up in upwards of $60,000 if you load it up.
Right, but it is unabashedly and unmistakably premium. I mean, the tires on it are just, it's almost at the edge of cartoonish because the tires are so gigantic on this smaller vehicle. But it didn't cross that line. They just pulled it back enough. And as you say, it's incredibly capable off-road. And so, I just think it was a great looking vehicle. It was cute because they had Joe Eberhard, who's the president of Land Rover North America, and he's a big music fan as well. So they had a local band playing that he himself had found, and it showed a nice personality and nice side to this brand.
Well, it's basically, it picks up some Velar
Yes,
hues. So
it does.
hard to argue with the way that one looks. For
Absolutely.
sure. I wonder also, like, I'm trying to remember, the original Evoque had a lot of actually, it was basically an LR2 with a different top hat. And so it had a lot of Volvo XC60 in it too. So I wonder how far they've moved it from there.
Well,
I think this shares the same platform with the Jaguar E-Pace.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think it's a new architecture.
So not bad. Jaguar's good stuff.
Yeah.
not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. What else we got?
I mean, we covered the high points pretty well here for.
It was the 30th year anniversary of the Miata and the Acura NSX.
Yeah, 30 years ago at this show, the 1989 Chicago Auto Show is where both of those cars were announced. The NSX didn't go on sale for another year and a half after that, but the Miata did go on sale later that year, and we saw they had the first NSX serial number 1 on display here with one of the latest versions, and they also Mazda showed a 30th anniversary special edition of the Miata, of which they're only going to build 2,000 globally. It'll be available both the coupe and the RF hardtop and the convertible, which is the proper way to get any Miata. And it's got special racing orange paint scheme. Only 500 of them are coming to the U.S. and they're starting to take pre-orders for them. So if you, like me, are a Miata fan, you might want to consider getting one.
Yeah, that's a pretty slick looking Miata. It's got a nice yellow orangey kind of hue to it. It looks very happy to be enthusiastic about being a good driver's car.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually at the party that Mazda had this evening, I got a chance to meet Tommy Matano, who's the original designer of the Miata. And I asked him, I said, at the time, did you know that you were designing this legendary vehicle? And he started laughing. He goes, no. He goes, we were just designing something that we could afford to buy. But that's kind of the beauty of the Miata, is that it's just incredibly authentic, incredibly organic.
Yeah, it's the best MGB ever made.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's what he said, was that they all had those. He had a little Fiat 500 Spider. He himself had those small cars. His colleagues had little MGBs and such, but they wanted a new one that they could actually afford and
that they could afford and that would be reliable.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like Sam, I bet your Miata doesn't mark its territory nearly as much as an MGB or a Spitfire does.
Nope, not at all. It's 29 years old and still doesn't leak oil.
What? That's not possible.
Yeah. Hey, it's a Mazda.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had some questions. If we wanted to touch on those real quick,
sure,
before we started to move. So one question left over from last week, and this one is just a little bit inside baseball, but I thought it might be just worth touching on. How do you get cars? Did they follow us to Wheelbearings because we built a previous relationship? We're obviously a smaller team than the big guys, and they're not going to throw cars at everybody calling themselves
Who you calling small?
Right. So this is from Twitter. I think the username was I am banana, or the handle. So yes, I think that's true. If you start off and you call yourself a blog, you either have to do the hard work to build an audience, or you have to start from somewhere that had an audience and then split off like we did. Yeah. And every day now I expect, at least on my end, that they're going to tell me I can't have any more cars.
And, in my case, because of my primary job as an analyst, an industry analyst, and I think the same goes for you, Rebecca. Mm-hmm. That's part of why we get access to the press cars, because we're evaluating the products that they're putting out there, and what we glean from driving these cars, we get an understanding of what kind of what they're putting out there, how it fits in, how they, how the different manufacturers compare. So, in addition to doing reviews here on the show and other venues where we write stuff about these cars, it's also feeding into the work that we do as analysts, to understand the industry and, to help out the clients that we work with, to understand what's going on in this space. So that's part of why, I certainly a big part of why I get access to these cars.
Right. And likewise, it's, for me, if I'm evaluating a company, even, from a financial standpoint, I'm not a stock analyst, but just looking at, I will often get asked about their financial performance. And, if I'm driving, if I drive the GMC Sierra or the Chevy Silverado, and I think, I'm not so sure about this, then I can potentially look and say, they could have a hard time selling this product. On the flip side, if I say, look, this is absolutely fantastic, then I can say, I think that GM's probably going to do okay because they've got some really good product in the lineup. So, also it's great to have the opportunity to compare and contrast, to, to look at things and say, this is why, maybe I prefer this small crossover over that small crossover, because we get to drive different products at different times. So I do think it just overall, it just gives us a better understanding of what's in the marketplace, how this brand will be performing, and who they're going to appeal to with a certain product, or whether a product is going to be appealing at all.
Yeah, and our audience may be small, but they're mighty.
It's about quality, not quantity.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of our audience, I just want to touch on something else as well. I know personally that there are quite a few people that listen to this show that work in the auto industry, that work for various automakers and suppliers, so. I run into them at, various events that I go to at auto shows and conferences. And, we appreciate that you listen and we love that. And, we love the feedback. I know that there's a lot of people that listen that are also, involved, they're involved in development of various either electronic control systems or automated vehicles or EVs, infotainment systems. Even for those that aren't, right now is actually, especially in Detroit, is getting to be a tough period. There's a bunch of people getting laid off as manufacturers, particularly GM right now, but, also Ford and I'm sure even FCA and other manufacturers are shifting their workforce, trying to get new skill sets in to adapt to a changing marketplace. And so, one of the, there's a lot of new software techniques, new electronics that are coming on stream, and understanding of that. One of the ways that for people working on this stuff to understand that stuff better is there's a lot of good developer conferences where you can learn a lot of stuff, especially talking to other developers. One of those is the NVIDIA GPU Technology Conference. And NVIDIA does 7 of these around the world now. The first one of 2019 is next month in San Jose, and I'll actually be there attending that because they also have a track for analysts there. But for anybody that's listening, if you're interested in attending, they've got over 500 different sessions and tech talks there, including a whole bunch that are focused specifically on automotive. Various automotive aspects, from infotainment systems to simulation, automated driving systems. If you're interested in going, NVIDIA has actually given us a discount code, which we'll include in the show notes. It's MCX Navigant. That's MCX Navigant, and I'll put that in the show notes. That use that discount code if you register, and you'll get a 20% discount off the cost of your pass for the NVIDIA GPU Technology Conference in Silicon Valley.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That would be a good time.
Yeah, no, it's a great conference, and you get to attend a Jensen Wang keynote, which is a fascinating event if you've never experienced one. But there's a lot of great, it's a great opportunity to learn and to talk to other developers and engineers that are using these same tools, and also, to learn directly from the folks at NVIDIA, about the software frameworks that they have, and all the stuff that they have, all the tools that they have available. So, if that's an area of interest to you, check it out, and use that discount code for 20% off.
I'm surprised to hear that FCA is having layoffs too. I guess I don't follow it that closely. But
they haven't announced it. Yeah, they haven't announced any layoffs or any intention to do any layoffs. But I strongly suspect that in the not too distant future, we will hear, something about them shifting, trying to make adjustments in their workforce, to get different skill sets in, because that's basically everybody's trying to get a lot more software people in there to deal with electrified vehicles, automation, and more advanced communications and infotainment systems. So that's those are tough skill sets to find. So if you can develop those skill sets, for yourself, you might have a better chance of keeping your job going forward.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that it's not that the industry is contracting. It's
changing. Yeah.
It's changing a lot. And the requirements of the jobs are changing because the face of mobility is changing. Mm-hmm. And so it's difficult because people with 20, 30 years of experience are getting let go. But it's really a matter of just the demands of the job, the requirements that manufacturers need to keep up with Silicon Valley, to keep up with the pace of mobility changes is really the challenge that they're facing.
It happens in every industry to a degree. Anytime there's an upheaval, it's a little different now because of what cars are and how they're incorporating so much software and tech, and that tech is coming from other places. And there are other approaches. I mean, the Silicon Valley approach is very effective in a lot of ways, but when you're talking about moving that into an automobile, you can't necessarily be as quick and as nimble. And that was another sort of topic that we touched on. I know, Sam, you dug into it on Twitter a little bit, why cars don't use state-of-the-art, sort of cutting-edge electronics. And it even goes all the way down to the materials that they're made of, the silicon and the chips. I very flippantly, not flippantly, I suppose, but off the cuff, I was just like, cars are not phones. They cost $30,000. People keep them for 12 years. They're a power plant. They are technology and communications and a safety cage, all on four wheels. So they're not phones, and that kind of like phone software thing isn't necessarily better. It's just another way to do it. And at a certain point, that discipline crosses with the car discipline of, hey, this has to last from minus 70 degrees to 150 degrees in the sun and work and be reliable for a decade and cost $30,000. So
yeah, and have 30,000 different parts to it.
Right.
Yeah, and not be susceptible to things like electromagnetic interference. I mean, you've got 150. In some cases, 150 separate computers in the car operating, everything from your power seats to your power windows and, your sequential turn signals and all kinds of other fancy stuff. There's software in every one of those things, and with all these electronics in the vehicle. And it's funny. I was talking to somebody recently. The wiring harness for some vehicles today is so heavy and so complex that it can take 8 or 9 people to unpack a single wiring harness from the box and install it into the car on the assembly line.
Wow.
That's insane. That is just absolutely nuts.
Well, that's why imagine what it would be without something like CAN.
Yeah. But in order to make all this stuff work and make it work reliably over time in these really harsh conditions, you said, from temperatures, that typically the design specs are usually from minus 40 Fahrenheit to 120 degrees Fahrenheit is what things are designed for, but it is also humidity, from desert, dry to 100% humidity and rain, and, it's got to be sealed against weather. You got vibration, when you hit those potholes and rumble strips, all that vibration, this stuff cannot fall apart. And so, what typically happens is the electronics that go into these vehicles is not, the latest and greatest stuff that comes out, that came out last week. It's stuff that is usually, by the time it gets into the vehicle, it's usually at least 2, 3, 4 years old, since the original version of it was introduced. And then it's been made automotive grade in order to withstand those kinds of conditions over the lifespan of the vehicle. And so, that's why, you have this different kind of life cycle for this stuff, why it's usually not state of the art. I mean, as we move into automated vehicles, it's going to become more advanced, that we're going to be using more advanced parts. But, we're talking today, when we get, partial automated vehicles in 2020, 2021 that are using NVIDIA's Xavier chip, that's a chip that was announced in 2017. So that will have been 3 years, between the time it was announced, or actually 2016, it was first announced. In 2017, they first really started sampling it. By the time it's going to be almost 4 years by the time it actually gets into production vehicles, because, everything's got to be tested and validated. So, and by the time that car's been on the road for 10 years, now you're talking 12, 14, 15 years old, it's got to continue working. It's not like a phone that you throw away every 2 years and buy a new one. So it's a very different kind of use case.
Yeah. I have nothing else to add. Just sort of my theme for this episode. So we're at about an hour and a half, so I think it's probably a good time to call it. Unless there's anything else either of you wanted to add, but I think we've done a pretty full show.
I agree.
Pretty full week.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, good. In the meantime, please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, drop us some feedback into the review section of the podcatcher of your choice. Otherwise, if Apple Podcasts isn't where you do it, that's the big one. If you want to get in touch with us, we're at wheelbearingscast@gmail.com. You can, of course, also comment on the post at wheelbearings.media. The Twitter handle is @wheelbearingscast. The only vowel is the A in cast, because we're modern, like the kids. But thank you for listening, and here's hoping something interesting happens before the next show.
All right. I'm sure it will. There's never a dull moment in this business.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.